Okay, so now we're going to talk about anticipation. And basically, what anticipation um, is having your object or character uh, set up a move that they're going to make. When I was working for Disney, one things that the animators used to say is, if you're going to move your character, always move him in the opposite direction that you intend on moving him. And again, what this does is it kind of telegraphs to the audience, or in our case, the player, what's going to happen. You're basically setting up an action. So here we have a ball, and we are going to anticipate the move that's going to happen this way. So now that, in very simple essence, and you see this a lot in cartoons, ball backs, the characters will kind of do this scramble and actually move backwards before actually taking off, right? I mean, in its simplest form, there you go. You could use a squash to set up an anticipation for, let's say, a jump. So I am going to just modify, turn on grid snapping, and I'm going to pop this down to the center of the grid. So that way, turn that off. When I scale it, it scales from that point. So we can have the squash be our anticipation. Now, one thing you want to remember, and we'll cover this too when we get into the squash and stretch principle, is you want to maintain volume anytime you do a squash or a stretch. So if you're squashing it down, you want the volume on Z and X is going to go out. So it's going to kind of maintain its volume, and it looks like it might even squash more. So it doesn't look like it's shrinking or growing. Maybe that's too much, but it's good enough for our purposes here. And then you can have this be this big anticipation build up, and then you can stretch it way out. You want to try to keep those. Usually squashes and stretches, you want it to happen over only a few frames. Bring it up. And then as it comes up, it kind of resets itself to, let's just net out 1. And you can do this mathematically too, by your channels over here. So if the y-axis is going down to let's say 0.5 to make it easier, then the scale X and Z would go up maybe that same amount, 1.5 or thereabouts. So now, have that go up a little bit. Up the graph editor here. We're going to flatten that. Go through this. We want to flatten that. That's what we were getting at overshoot there. And then the scales. Those should be all should be fine for the time being. Okay, so now you have that squash as your anticipation. Since you can't move past the ground here, that might be an option for an anticipation. Now, a lot of times, and I discussed this a little bit, I think in the arcs section, that we can't always anticipate our actions, especially in combat, because the playability and the reaction that the player tune is supposed to do when the player hits a button supposed to be instantaneous, so the player feels like they're in control of the character, and there's a direct correlation with the button hits and the action that happens. Oh no, it was in the overlapping section. Anyway, so sometimes we can't anticipate everything, which can be frustrating from an animator standpoint. Okay, we're going to load up this video here of God of War 3, part of a walkthrough that I got from YouTube. And I chose God of War 3 because it's keyframed, it's not mocap, which, since that's what we're really covering here is animation, not motion capture, even though, a lot of the same principles apply, but, you're basically getting a performance from, an actor instead of providing the performance yourself. So it takes a lot of our the fun out of it for us. But anyway, here you can see he's got a little wind up there a little bit. These are these chain attacks, so it's really nice. You do get a little anticipation there. It just always has to happen really fast. And depending on the combat requirements, from the design team, we may not always have that option to do these anticipations. Yeah, each move is kind of links up, kind of backed it up there, links up to the next attack. Fast forward it. There we go. Oh, too far. VLC doesn't have a way, at least that I know of, that I can back up. I can frame advance forward, but I can't go backwards. So there's a nice wind up there. There's a hit. And he winds up here. There's a hit. And they're all connecting from one into the other. There's a hit. So sometimes we only get a couple frames of anticipation. Sometimes, none at all. But a lot of times we can actually add that anticipation is when at the end of a chain of attack, you kind of get this a bigger attack that, in the case of God of War, they do this big slowdown with this big anticipation, and then, the release of the attack, which is always cool. And those are opportunities where, as animators, we can really add that bit in there. So actually, I'm going to go back. I'm going to just play it at speed again so you can see just how fast this stuff happens. And it's almost hard to read because it's just so fast that you really almost don't even see those anticipations. What we did a lot on DCUO is, after a hit, we'd actually hold the last pose, the extreme of, like a punch or a kick, so they would read really strongly, at the end, and you'd be able to chain them in rapid succession with the hits. And if you stopped mashing the button, it would kind of hold that pose a little bit, but it wouldn't it wouldn't stay locked in that animation. You were able to break out of it by, continuing a chain of attacks if you wanted to. But if you stopped, then you would kind of see that pose for a little bit before returning back to the idle pose, which was good. It just helped for readability in that. I'll see if I can find some videos on that. Okay, so here we go again. These chain attacks, and you can see here at the last one where he jumps up in the air. Actually, he doesn't jump, but he lifts the axes up in the air. He kind of holds it for a beat before coming down, which is really nice. It gives you that. What's nice about that is it also breaks up the timing. You get these super fast hits, and then you get this last one where it gives a player kind of a chance to catch up and pause and see what's going on, and then you get this really good visceral release with that last really hard hit, which is works really well for gameplay, and I think for the player as well. There it is, that move again. And then he holds that pose as he comes up, which is really nice. Okay, now here we have a bit of DCUO. That's DC Universe Online. And this is some of the animations I've done for the open-handed power source. Just to kind of go over what I was talking about earlier. So here we have, there's not a ton of anticipation. We're just kind of getting that pose out there, letting it stand out there. And that's what you're reading, right? And it's this pose that kind of helps let the audience know what's happening. So we kind of hit these poses and kind of stick them, and that was how we, kind of dealt with the fact we don't have these really big anticipations, but we had, because we had such a short time from the design constraints to, kind of get these things out there. So we didn't quite anticipate them quite as much as we'd like. We did as what we could with what we had. And that's basically, when you're animating for games, it's a lot of back and forth with design. You block some animations in really quickly, some poses. When I worked with Louise Krull, when we were designing this, it was all just like I would do a pose, like that pose, and then I would do another pose. So we could get into the game with these animations, test them out, see how they were feeling from a gameplay standpoint, see if they were reading from a visual standpoint, and we would go back and forth like that. And it was really fun. It was actually probably the most fun I had on the game of the stuff that I animated. It was just a total blast. And I'll go back so you guys can kind of see that at speed. All right, here we go. It's coming up. There it is. So you can see that. You see how fast it happens. So we don't really have time to get any kind of anticipation in there. And again, it's one of the constraints with when you're working on games, because you want to have that that visceral effect from the player, mashing those buttons and having the toon react immediately when he does so. So it's a really kind of a fine dance that we do, when we're working with design and in animation, and we're kind of going back and forth to try to figure out what looks best and what feels best. But feeling the best gameplay wise is really what's paramount, and that's really what dictates what our animations are going to be a lot of times, or the timings we're going to have. And the animators, a lot of times will push back in certain areas, and it's a give and take. But this was a pretty fun process. All right, so let's close out of that, and we're gonna open back that jump for anticipation. As an example, I wanted to go in here. Actually, wanted to open up the dummy. That rudimentary reg here. So again, anticipation. If you wanted to do a jump for a character, for film or TV or something, you wouldn't want to just have them pop up like that, because it'll look really mechanical. And oops, wanted to middle mouse drag there. Middle mouse. Save. It looks very mechanical. So, to anticipate it, we'd move them down, and then we'd also rotate them kind of get that buildup of pressure and that tension like a spring. That's a little fast. Oh, what happened? Oh, I see. Save that. I didn't have keyframes on there. I normally do. Grab these guys, rotate them up, and then we're going to set that rotation to 0. Now this is really fast, so we're going to add some keyframes in here, or in between, sorry. My hotkey that I set up. So now, when you see him bend down like that, you know he's going to jump in the air. Again, everything's in anticipation. Whenever possible. Again, gameplay, a lot of times you don't have that. So if this guy was going to start to run, have him come back a bit first. Maybe even he would twist back and arch a little bit. Want to use more than one axis, and all. I'm doing a lot of this stuff relatively quickly. Get him to run. So we're moving back even further, I think, to show that anticipation. He's running forward. It's a little bit of a wind-up. So, and then maybe he, as he's coming forward, kind of bring him around here to give him a little arc in his path. Open up the graph editor. Take the translation. I believe is on X. And then we could go to curves. Select this one. Curve, post infinity, linear. Now he's going to continue to move off green there. Again, these are really rough. They're not really meant to look pretty. It's just to give you the idea, of what anticipation is.